Welcome to today's session, where our presenter will talk about software in the age of human and AI collaboration, preparing people and value propositions. This session is a level 200, and you'll learn more about how to think about the future now that the technology is here. Before we welcome him onto the stage, if you haven't already, could you please download the AWS Summit app via the QR codes on the screen. Please join me in welcoming onto the stage Sri, our Principal Solutions Architect here at AWS.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Brandon. Great to see you all here enjoying the summit. How good is this? Great time to be technologists with a purpose, with the aim to have an impact. What a time it is to be able to take all these technologies and put them to great use. The convenience to build has been evolving and improving over the decades by leaps and bounds. But in this era, in this new era, there has never been a better time to build. I've been thinking about this particular session and the theme about this for some time. I've been discussing with a fair few like-minded enthusiasts as to what could be the inflection points due to this rapid and rapidly evolving space and rapidly evolving technology. So I'm going to start by sharing the gist of the session up front. The recent technological advancements in software development have brought about huge improvements for our abilities to deliver software. And in doing so, it is going to give us time efficiencies. And the technology is accessible to everyone. Use that time, and the time that is now you could afford to put it to, or rather reinvest into creating value propositions that is going to change the course of your companies and change the course of your products. And I'm going to quickly step into what is the background to the gist of that session. First and foremost, if I ask you all to cast your minds all the way back to those early days when an individual or a few people came together, engaging in a few or a set of productive activities, taking some inputs and creating these goods of utility value. That's how everything started. But to take the value and deliver it to the masses, to the vast cross-section of the population and societies, and in that interest, we have scaled it. What were humble workshops became factories, and factories became industries, and industries became industrial economies. And during the course of scaling those values to the civilization, we have started to specialize. We started to look at the constituents of those chain of activities and look at what and how we can improve each constituent in a way that would enable the other constituent, so on and so forth, creating aggregate value at a mass scale. And in doing those innovations at a constituent level, we have taken advantage of the technology and its evolution in producing great outcomes. And this is where the first time, let's call it the 450 years of industrial evolution, we've constantly evolved, constantly innovated, brought machines into play. Humans and machines have collaborated together to create this vast value to the large economies and societies. And you could even attribute what we now call or have taken for granted the modern conveniences of life. We could all attribute that to the endeavors of all the people who have been working with technology, creating these innovations and bringing them to life. We can attribute our conveniences to that. So technology has played a key role, and so did the collaboration with humans. And first time, and to put it in perspective, the first time in our industry, which is the software industry, we now have that power to use the machines to create software. So far, we've had many conveniences. Even we have looked at our subparts. So think of the microprocessor. Think of the assembly language on top. Think of the software programming languages on top. The kernels we have created, the operating systems we have created, the libraries, the SDKs, the APIs, the AWSs, right? And even SaaS. All of these offered us the convenience to go and build what we think is most useful in our purpose, to deliver to our customers or users or any other stakeholders that we believed were going to benefit from it. But this is the very first time on either sides of those abstractions that we've created, which was largely dealt with by humans. We conceived a thought, came up with the ideas, brainstormed on the whiteboard, and put our fingers to the keyboard and written that software manually. And this is the inflection point that I want you all to remember and recognize that we are passing through. This is the moment in our industry that software is going to change how we have been creating and delivering software. During the course of the last, let's call it 1.5 days, I'm sure you would have sat through a few sessions or had a few interactions on the trade floor with some of our folks from AWS. We have a service called Q Developer, which is enabling developers to take their ideas and make it into working prototypes, scale it into scalable production models. You start with a natural language intent. We call it agentic coding. It has a chat interface. You can integrate into your favorite IDE. In this case, I'm showing VS Code. Or you even have a CLI interface if you prefer that mode of interaction. You can start with a natural language intent, give it the idea broadly what you want, and you can shape it further, and it's going to produce code for you. It can write the code. Hand on hearts, how many of you really, really liked writing tests? We all understand and acknowledge that they are important aspects of producing reliable software, but truly, we'd rather prefer to focus on the functionality of the product. So in this instance, it can even help you write tests. And not just that, it can take the code that you've produced and are about to produce, and even that which has been produced in the past. You can ask it to review that code and make suggestions as to how to improve it in the direction that you prefer it to improve it towards. And most of us would actually like a blank canvas. Get the idea from the product manager, discuss, brainstorm, and get on with programming it, creating that software product from a blank canvas. But the reality is, most of us, most of the times, do have to deal with existing software systems. And this is where I think QDev shines even more. It helps you understand the existing code bases so that you can make changes confidently. You can bring on new people where they can become productive much more quickly than what was possible before. And not just that, during the run stages where, how many of you actually were woken up by your pagers going off at the time that you felt, why would the pager go off always at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Wouldn't these systems have any other work? They have enough work to do. Why would the systems wake me up in ungodly hours? And here, Q Developer, this is in preview, we call it operational investigations. It is able to identify the anomalous behavior that is taking place behind the scenes and alert you about potentially this is what is happening, and it'll offer the reason why it could be the case so that you can take preventative action and perhaps even help you get to the root cause faster, helping you resolve it in time. Much like some of you, after looking at all of this capability, to be able to write software, the tests, and review code, and make suggestions, and even help us during the runtime, a thought crosses our mind. I wish I had this capability at my fingertips when I started a few decades ago. I'm sure that thought crossed some of your mind too. But I'm conflicted. Am I glad that I have went through all those, some of those days where you're pulling all-nighters to fix the code, some piece of the code with esoteric bugs you're unable to troubleshoot, right? It would create all those learning opportunities for you to understand more about the systems you're dealing with and understand more about how systems interact and work in weird and wonderful ways. I probably am glad that I got the chance to do that. But at the same time, I'm excited for all of us and those who are even entering the industry now who could take advantage of the new tooling available. And in the future, throughout the software development lifecycle, in fact, I would call it as much as product development lifecycle, we would all have the advantage of now applying this newfound convenience and newfound power towards what we think were only ideas on the blank canvas to something that is more realizable. And frankly, humans and machines have interfaced with each other, worked in synchrony, in tandem, produced all the goods of value together. And there have been occasions when even us, as technologists, were helping out our fellow machines. Imagine those days when you were giving it a gentle tap on the screen or nudge to the computer cabinet to make it go on and do its work, right? So We need the machines, and frankly, even machines need us. And to describe, there are many instances or many places where humans and machines are working together productively. And one fascinating example, I find it fascinating, one example that I find it fascinating is in context of an airport. In the last 20 odd years, if you've gone to any reasonably large scale airport, especially the transit points, you could see machines moving people and goods from point A to point B, right? Starting with flights. Airplanes are one of the most sophisticated machines, both in its physical form, the mechanical nature of it, as well as the electronics and the software that goes behind the scenes, not just managing things like lights and screens, but also even helping the professionals in the cockpit ferry us all across safely from point A to point B. The sophistication in the last 50 to 60 years in how that technology is helping the professionals in the cockpit is immense. Yet, we're relying on the people's judgment at the right places so that the safety is of paramount importance. On the other end of the spectrum, I could take another example where autonomous trains move us, or patrons of the airport, between terminals. The role that the humans play there is they are in the control systems rooms or looking at the control panels as to how everything is coming together. And to the other end of the spectrum, I'm sure some of us have traveled to be here today. And I'm sure most of us are glad there is some level of machinery behind the scenes that is making sure that our bags are reaching the flight and then reaching back onto the conveyor belt we can pick it from, right? So humans and machines have come together to create these experiences that we all now call or taken for granted as conveniences of modern day life. And if you've noticed in that context of the airport, there is always a scope, a constraint, an objective, and a purposeful intent to improve something. And we could take that framework and overlay it on top of the scopes that we deal with today as product creators and software creators. So in context of software, if I ask you to look at the labels stacked vertically here, right from a feature method, right from the function method all the way through to a full scale application, if we call those as scopes, today the technology at our fingertips, at our disposal, can act at different scopes. And its possibility, or its capability today is stretching from assistive, meaning when we interact with it, ask it to do something, it'll do something for us, and then we have to guide it, all the way from that end of the spectrum, all the way through to getting to autonomous. Today, you can point a user story at this particular tool and say, go ahead and give me a working functional capability. It can do that. So you don't have to restrict yourself to just the scopes that I'm showcasing here. But you can look at how you're going to divide up what you are dealing with in your context into different scopes, and how you're going to bring these tools and the power of these tools in those scopes along that spectrum of where things are at. And it is already having positive impact. And I'm sure most of you would have seen some of the stories that are coming out, especially last year. And this was in our blogs, it was in news articles, and even to an extent where our CEO, Andy Jassy, spoke about this in the annual shareholder letter, where we've used QDev for currency upgrades or software upkeep, where moving from one version to the other version, it was taking n number of hours. And just at the scale at which we operate, to be able to take QDev and apply it towards code transformations or upgrades, we're able to save 4,500 hours, which equated to 260 million in improvement costs. And that is at Amazon scale. And you would hear many other notable people or notable brands talking about how this is going to change the future of software development. You will see a lot of percentages that are going about. Some are saying 60% AI is able to write the code. Some are saying 90% of the code can be written by AI. Whatever those percentages, the reality still stays, which is it is having a very profound influence in how we approach software delivery. So what matters is focus less on the percentages take the capability, take the evolutionary and revolutionary influences it's going to bring to your context. Try it out. You are the best judge of where you are, and therefore you will be the best judge of how this technology will influence your future direction. There are many barriers to, so if you think about a product and if you think about a market and if you think about the competition field, there are many barriers to entry, right? For somebody who wants to enter or somebody who's already there wanting to get to the next echelon. And there are many barriers to entry, the three which are time, cost, and resources, and effort. This particular technology is going to effort us all the time that we always wished we had to pursue more ideas that were just picking up dust in the shelf, right? So my key takeaway is the barriers to entry to take your idea to life are now falling. I don't want to go back and quote that very well-withered adage is, all you now have to do is rely on your imagination, right? You're limited by your imagination, but I'm sure your imagination can flourish with the advent of new technology. And there is a different dynamic that is going to play out from here onwards. Because of the factors such as ease of access to this technology, everybody has access to it. In fact, Q Developer has a free tier. You don't even have to spend a penny. Just get on the free tier and experience for yourself what it might look like for your purposes. And it's ease of use. Anybody can jump on, interact with it using natural language, and produce something that is functional and that fits your desired outputs or outcomes. And it's nominal cost. So what these factors are doing is if you cast it in or overlay it on top of Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovation framework, where any emergence of technology, in this instance I'm referring to AI and SDLC, will take its course through the entire ecosystem. And the x-axis there is the time. And with these factors, the time is becoming shorter and shorter when a technology evolution like this is going to be evolving. A technology evolution like this is getting adopted quite rapidly across the board. You're all thinking, well, if I am the first mover on this particular technology, can I apply it in my own context and reap some efficiencies and bank those efficiencies? But the reality is everybody's got access to it. And this is where, if there are other players in your space offering similar things, you know where this is going. And I think, to quote Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, who probably have put it more eloquently, that any huge productivity increases that would come from introduction of a technology in production of a commodity product, the benefits will eventually all flow towards the buyer. It is talking about the competitive field. All of us are participating in a common space. We want to offer value, and that value has a certain price, and we compete on price at some stage. Right now, you're probably looking at a couple others in your space, looking over your shoulder for them. Where they're at, where you're at, where your customer's at, and what's that dynamic looking like. But given the falling barriers to entry that we spoke about, and given the wide access that everybody now has, time advantage is limited. And also that there are others who can probably spring into the space that you're operating in, given the falling barriers to entry. So suddenly, the field is much wider. So now you have to widen your field of view to address where your customer's at, where's your value proposition at, in which way are you having to evolve it, given the dynamic that is playing out. Everybody is going to be moving across different value chain, up and down the value chain, much like the way you're considering it. Given these dynamics, and given the falling barriers to entry, the natural focus in the very immediate term will have to be, how do I make sure that I'm able to keep my customers so that I adjust to this new norm, use the innovations in AI and SDLC, and start producing more value for my customers. But you start with defending what you have. And there are some parameters that all of us look at when we are defending what we have. Starting with the unique value proposition, stretching all the way across to continuous innovation. But what is unique value proposition when information spreads quite rapidly? Everybody's got access to the information. Now we're talking about democratized intelligence. So can you truly believe that what you have is a unique value prop? When everybody can eventually catch up, and it's only a matter of time, and time can be, people can catch up quite quickly with the tools. The second is distribution and network effects. Not all value propositions, not all our companies or not all our products would benefit or have the same level of defensibility factors like large distribution networks or network effects, right? And as you move along, the size of the customer base. At the same time, the brand that you have painstakingly built. What are you known by? What is your product known for? What is your brand known for amongst the markets that you are operating in, right? That is going to be a much bigger factor going forward. While there is a self-reinforcing influence of effect on each of these factors, there is one that stands out the most. It's continuous innovation. Continuous innovation can have a huge effect on all the other defensibility factors. I'm not saying one is more than the other. You would need all these factors working together in tandem. However, continuous innovation is going to have an outsized impact. So work on your brand, work on your degree of continuous innovation to be able to compete better in this new era. So far, we've been talking about creating the software. Creating the software, right, there's enough literature. We all have built a muscle, and both memory muscle and the ability to create working, productive software. But never ever it is for sure that a working software will find its market success. There are other factors that have to come together to find that success. And in this instance, I'm going to touch on what you have to do before even coming together to write the software, which is the customer research. And post you produce the software, how are you going to scale it into the market in the ways that makes most sense? Even if you do everything by the book here and by the rules, success is not assured. And this is where, in this new era, our human ability or the human's attention is going to be somewhat shuffled around to see where our ingenuity will add most value in the spectrum. And one of the key aspects as we embark on this journey is going to be our ability to learn. There are things that can always be black and white, and there are things that we will develop as a muscle as we go through that journey. So just make sure that take advantage of the tooling that you've got, get through your ideas, validate those ideas in the market. The faster you go through this cycle, more learning you will have. The most important point I want to make here is time is your advantage. Use that time effectively so that you can have more iterations and also have given the product the time in the market. Where do we start from here? So far we talked about, okay, the technology is here, this is how the competitive dynamic might play out, and we are all hungry for creating more value for our customers to defend our customers. Where do you start? So far, if you've been looking at technology and thought about viability, you have created capability in your product against the completeness of the vision, which is much larger. You thought only a certain part of it can be accomplished given the viability dynamic and the cost structure. With the new technology and the falling barriers to entry, now you could actually aim to get through more of the vision, achieve more of the initial product vision that you have. And why just stop there? If you have this ability in your hands, what about the suppliers who have the same ability? How about your partners who have the same ability? How about even putting this power in the hands of your users to create capabilities on top of your products that will be fit for purpose to them? So think about how this is going to increase the breadth and depth of your product vision. We can apply the same lens to addressable segments. Today, you're targeting a few addressable segments, thinking that this is where I have a, let's call it the Goldilocks space of being able to offer right value to the right set of customers, to the right size of the market at a certain margin. But now, the cost dynamics have changed. You can still protect your margin and go after more of different segments. So think about what that means for you. And while we are doing that, for a foreseeable couple of years, all of our focus in bringing value on top of a product is going to be about Gen AI. Gen AI is a foundational technology, much like electricity and the motors after how the industrial scale revolution has kicked on and continuing. For the foreseeable future, we're going to be embedding Gen AI into our products, whether it's reimagining experiences for your users or reimagining the workflow efficiencies in the back office. And some of the areas that matter the most when your teams are engaged in that endeavor are going to be ones that I listed on the y-axis, starting with evals. While machines can do what they need to do and what they can do best, us humans need to be fully aware as to whether or not they are doing it to our desired bounds. So start with evals, and there's the list. And when you start creating products, we would want to take advantage of what's already out there so that you can start building on top. We talked about the abstractions. Every abstraction, every layer that is already made available at a nominal cost is actually to your advantage. So starting with QDev, that can help you write software, review, improve your software. Agents, LLMs, look at Bedrock. And in Wordly mapping, you know that the y-axis is representative of, at the top of the axis is being closest to the customer, meaning whatever you're creating is most visible to the customer, and whatever is to the lower end of that y-axis is invisible to the customer. You would want to maximize creating value that is closest to the customer. And you would want to use technology that is already productized and utilitarian in nature so that you can start imagining what is that pioneering, differentiating efforts that you can put to customer, to things that are visible to the customer. So what I say here is take your systems, push them to the right, meaning make them more standardized, make them more work consistent. Utilize that, and then elevate the human's abilities, attention, and focus to more pioneering, differentiating work on the left. Ultimately, all of this have to come together, and what really matters is how many ideas you're taking to market, and how many of those ideas get adopted successfully, for which we all need the time. And this is where the new technology efforts is all that time. So the key takeaways of the last 20-odd minutes is essentially this. Innovate relentlessly, because in this new era, continuous innovation is going to be the most effective lever to both defend and grow. Bring your people closer to your customers and users' experiences, pains, and gains. Reduce that cycle time. Sharpen their ability to understand what might be required so that they're able to produce without any delay. No one person, or no one team, or no one company knows what is going to happen. Equip every individual with this new technology, new advancements, and let the human ingenuity guide what that better tomorrow looks like. And finally, as organizations, think about not just in piecemeal fashions, but at an aggregate scale, given the newfound capabilities, how are we going to be able to reform for the new era? You had the great judgment today to pick this session, and even better taste for you have stayed through. So I'd really love to hear your feedback.
Thank you, Sri, for such an informative session on human, AI, and collaboration.